everyone. Digitalization and sustainability, or its corollary, ESG, are the major drivers of economy today. In terms of HR contribution to digitalization, I think we are all well aware of that. Surprisingly, there's very little talk about how HR can contribute towards ESG. Today, we have very experienced senior HR practitioners who are exactly here to tell us how HR can contribute towards that. I'll just tee off and say a few words about ESG. Starting off with the G, governance, which is the foundation, the golden thread across environmental and social issues. Without a strong governance structure, ESG initiatives may come off to be more like a PR stunt. The corporate governance, as you may be aware, it has been improving in Asia since 1997, the Asian financial crisis. Firstly, improving on accounting issues, enterprise risk, board independence, executive compensation, then into reputation risk. Now we are into cyber risk, as well as other ESG risks. There are always risks on the horizon, and it takes board and management to work in partnership to address this risk. Environmental issues have been, there's been a push for doing something, taking some serious actions in environment for about 8 to 10 years. But things really picked up over the last 3 to 4 years. Most of the major Asian countries have signed up for net zero by 2050. And in the West, there are many shareholder proposals at the AGMs on environmental issues. Asian boards is facing the same concern as well. Social, a big part of the social issues is, of course, the workforce or human capital management. Then there's also customer protection. If you remember the mis-selling to customers in the global financial crisis not that long ago, then we also have community impact, labor standards and supply chain, etc. All this issue brewing up. The ESG is multifaceted with diverse stakeholders and interested parties. The panel, the focus that we have here is going to be very much on people and organization alignment to support the ESG drive. So if I may call on the panelists, each one of them to share with us how ESG factors are integrated into their respective businesses, and then we take it from there. Maybe I'll start with the gentleman first, right at the other end. Kunal.
I'll take the liberty. Thank you, Boon. Hello, everyone. I'm Kunal Wadhwani. I represent Choithrams Group. I'm from GCC. I'm based out of Dubai. Choithrams primarily is an organization which is diversified as far as industries are concerned, but I primarily take care of retail and FMCG distribution. I take care of and oversee HR operations for around 4,700 people. When we talk about how ESG should be integrated, let me take you back in 2014. Choithrams was in the process of changing the vision of the organization in 2014. And when we were sitting with our chairman and other stakeholders to determine what our vision should be, there was a lot of feedback that came in from the social factor, the employee factor. Many business heads came, together to try and see how we could define it. And as we speak today, and I quote, our vision of the organization is that our full of goodness vision is to be the preferred retailer and distributor of choice in the GCC by taking care of our employees, people, and the communities we serve. I think the whole concept of involving people and community in the vision strategy itself creates a pathway for the future wherein whatever strategy you try and determine for your organization, the processes that you create in your organization are all sustainable, are all associated to protecting the environment, protecting the people within and outside who are our customers.
Thank you, Kunal. Certainly, I think the ESG in a FMCG environment, that comes across very clearly. Vicky, can you tell us a bit about your experience?
Okay. So I'm Vicky. I used to head up the people function at Singlife with Aviva, which is a merger of two organizations, a traditional insurer, Aviva, and an insurtech called Singlife. Now, it is transforming itself to become a regional financial services company, but its core business today remains insurance, which is really about protecting people, families, and things. Given its origins, right, as an insurance company, there's a lot of impact and good that it brings, particularly from the social aspect of ESG. But insurance in general, whether it's GI or life and so on and so forth, can have and does actually have a lot of impact on the ESG elements, whether it's environment in terms of the policies, what you design for, what you cover, and also how you encourage consumer behavior change by the way you design and price different insurance products. So that's a bit of a background of insurance.
Thank you, Vicky. By the way, some of the Aon's clients are insurance carriers. They come to us to do analysis on ESG performance of the companies that they provide insurance brokerage to. So that will impact the insurance premium depending on the ESG performance. Kiran.
Yep. I think coming from telecom industry, we are in a business of connecting people. And I think connectivity has been one of the most important things, particularly when we talk about COVID and how important connectivity as a business became. When you talk particularly about ESG, I think, and we ask that question, who drives it and how we drive it, I think it's, as Kunal was saying, and as so is Vicky, I think it is driven by the principles and the values of a business, the core of the business. Why do you do business? Of course, every business is there to, make money. That's the core of it. But then there's always a purpose that is driving ESG, not just as a CSR project, but more as a competitive advantage. So of course, a business, an organization taking on ESG initiatives, or you call it sustainability or whatever name that you want to give it, not just for its social license of operating, but also to gain that kind of competitive edge in the societies, in the markets that you work in. So as a telecom company, of course, we work in Nordics and Asia both. And our vision and the purpose behind the initiatives under ESG has always been empowering societies. So we as a telecom are on the forefront of digitization. And you mentioned that digitization has really changed the overall outlook of the societies. So I think we've been trying to empower societies by eliminating the differences through using digital tools. So that has been the journey. And of course, ensuring that whatever we're doing under sustainability or ESG is an integral part of our strategy, which is a business strategy. So we drive it very structurally. And the implementation is there. And of course, you keep on refining it and reinforcing the messages across the organization.
Thank you, Kiran. I think certainly in the industry you are in, technology, the ESG reputation would attract the tech talent very much, or the new talent, the younger talent. I'm going to ask the panelists some questions to go a little bit deeper into the organization and people side of things. But I would encourage you to think of questions. We'll have enough time for you to ask what you want to ask of the panelists now that you have the opportunity to have them in front of us. My first question to the panelists is that who should be driving ESG in the organization? Other than the board and management, what function should be driving? If you have a chief sustainability officer, obviously that would be the person taking charge. If you don't, who should be driving in your organization or in your opinion? Maybe we start with Kiran.
I think I go back to what I said just earlier. So of course, functionally, as a function, as an opportunity, it lies with either CHROs or your corporate affairs officers. in order to run the initiatives and run the sustainability initiatives in the organization. But I think, as I said, it's a part of your, it's embedded as part of your strategy. So whatever initiatives an organization takes under ESG or sustainability, they're always part of the overall business strategy. So for example, we talk about being a telco, we talk about building more green grids. So of course, we need to have the technology organization within supporting the overall ambition. Why do we need to have more green grids? Why do we need to work more on carbon emission to eliminate and have less and less carbon emission? Similarly, for example, we are, as HR fraternity, we were talking about upskilling just a while back in the panel discussion. I think being on the digital forefront, as I said, it has been one of the ambitions to eliminate and give more and more opportunities to the masses to digitally upskill themselves. So there has been programs for consumers and societies to become part of that. We have a safe internet program as well that's going on around in different markets, digital upskilling programs. So these kind of things, although within the organization, as I said, it's part of the DNA that drives the overall thing. And then, of course, the responsibility is distributed amongst different functions. Normally, traditionally, it stands and lies with HR and corporate affairs, the way I've seen it.
Thank you for that. Vicky, any you to add?
I have an interesting proposition. So I believe, of course, you should always have an executive sponsor, right? This is how you can actually drive initiatives and programs through the organization. HR as a function is a facilitator. It works to embed processes in the people processes to ensure that, there's recognition, there is investment in skills, thinking, spaces to collaborate on such initiatives. But what I would like to propose is, instead of having a person or a function drive it, start an employee working committee, a working group, because our colleagues in our business today are passionate about ESG or certain elements of it, right? And the best ideas, in my opinion, come from our colleagues in the business. They interact with customers, they interact with our suppliers, our other stakeholders intimately. They can see what impact such initiatives will have on these different stakeholder groups. So empower, just as organizations run innovation labs, right? Do an ESG lab, open it to employees, let them run it, let a working group drive it, reward, recognize, take the ideas that make sense into fruition and celebrate and keep it going, right? At the same time, what employees will learn is how to make these initiatives sustainable from a business perspective. It's not just about giving, it's also about making sure things like the triple bottom line actually is profitable.
Thank you, Vicky.
Well, I agree with both my colleagues over here. I think there is no definite answer to who should be driving ESG, but allow me to bifurcate the size of the organization. In a large organization where there is massive headcount, massive investments, by the virtue of being a bigger organization, there could be possibly a team, a chief sustainable officer or a chief ESG officer, that a company may want to appoint. But when you talk about SMEs who may not have, the aptitude of having an independent team working on this particular thing, I think it should be a top-down approach. When I say top-down approach, it is very important for the stakeholders in the organization to be absolutely convinced about ESG principles and how it affects them positively, right? Because if they are not, you may have a chief sustainability officer in the organization or a team that caters to your ESG requirements, and they will come with brilliant ideas, right? But what's the point of giving those ideas when the essence is not understood at the stakeholder level, right? So it is important that the stakeholders understand. And I think in SMEs especially, CEO is a profile that is going to play a very crucial role, especially in a board meeting, to drive the agenda of ESG. It is all about convincing the stakeholders that what is in it for them. When you drive ESG, you're talking about top line growth, you're talking about cost reductions within the organization, you're talking about getting some amount of flexibility and relief in legal interventions, right? So when you explain these things and make them understand what is in it for them, and you convince them, when it drills down, then it is actually going to hit each and every employee's perspective within the organization. So it's not about having a pinboard in the organization where you write ESG and talk about the emphasis of ESG. I think if you have to implement it, especially in an SME, I come from a medium-sized organization, it is important to even have KPIs within the organization associated to ESG and how each and every department will create a flavor for ESG for that matter.
Thank you for that. I think all of you touch on a very important point of the HR is a collaborative function, has the ability to pull the different functions together. There's some surveys showing that the Chief Sustainability Officer, majority of them are finance background in Asia Pac, more so than in the West. It's great to have finance to look at the ESG impact on finance, etc. But you need to pull everybody together. That's what all of you are saying very much. Maybe let's talk a little bit about social. First of all, HR is a custodian of human capital, and a big part of social capital as well. Part of it is human capital, part of it is the community, etc. Then the environment side, natural capital. So it's a sort of a custodian of many different things. But let's focus on social capital. What are your organization doing in terms of especially with the workforce as well as the community itself? What are some of the things that you like to share with your audience?
I can start. I think there has been a lot of programs, as I mentioned. I mentioned a few just right now, the digital skill programs that we have, or we have a very wonderful program that's really sort of builds into the community, digital birth registration. This is one of the programs that we started back in Pakistan. It's one of the markets that we're operating. And the rural communities where when a child is born, they don't have any means to register them with any of the government body or to register their birth. So there was one platform that we provided for digital birth registration. And I think that was hugely appreciated, of course, across, but it also sort of adds to the kind of purpose that I was mentioning earlier of empowering societies by the kind of business that we do, because that's how we see the purpose. This is what we want to sort of drive. So this is just one of the examples of the programs. Also the fact that when we talk about how do we drive it and what's important in it, it's also important to keep up with the trends as well. So when it comes to social, environment, climate, we've been talking a lot about climate nowadays and how important it is to now start worrying about it, because all of us working in different industries, every industry having their own carbon emission, I think now I see companies now being more and more conscious about these things, taking more and more proactive steps towards what are the trends, how do we benchmark ourselves, how do we measure ourselves, how do we report ourselves. And of course, it is a question of big investments as well. You change the way you work, you change the way you invest. So I think it has been very consciously thought through now in terms of bigger organization and even smaller organization taking part in that conversations, that how do we make that difference towards the society. Of course, that's one. Secondly, of course, being an employer, also it has a societal impact on how do we employ, what kind of skills do we take in people, how much diversified are we equal opportunity or not? And these kind of things kind of build into the ESG side of things, because you empower, you make sure that you are providing jobs and creating more and more jobs, not only for a certain set of people, but more diversified people, diversified in their background, ethnicity. So all of these kind of things, part of the HR strategy, attracting these kind of talents and ensuring that, they've been provided with the right benefits. So all of these things, the way I see it, they become part of the societal element of ESG from an HR perspective, making sure that, the policies are as per the labor laws. So or even more actually, to be equitable in terms of how we pay them at all levels. So I think all of these smaller things, if you really think about it, they build into the societal end, because being an employer, an organization working in any market, you do bring in a lot of difference, the way you operate. So I think that's how, as an HR fraternity, we should be sort of looking into more contributing towards this topic, particularly.
I will speak more broadly from a financial services sector perspective rather than just pure insurance. One important social aspect is promoting financial literacy, right? That is something we do not teach children in school. It's not a subject that you learn in university. And yet when you graduate, you have many, many financial agents banging down your door, trying to sell you products you don't understand and possibly don't need, but are saddled for the rest of your adult life, right? So this is a very clear, easy initiative that many financial services companies, including insurance companies, can start to sow the seeds from a social aspect in ESG.
Thank you.
I'll give you a very crisp answer to this. 5 things that Choithrams does, Choithrams HR does, especially from the social side of ESG perspective. I think number 1, we create policies associated to ESG. You talk about, anti-discrimination policy or anti-harassment policy in the organization, catering to even bullying for that matter within the organization. So, create those kind of policies, create an ethics hotline within the organization, right? Talk to people in case, they want to blow a whistle or anything that happens within the organization, create those guidelines, code of conduct guidelines for them. The second aspect that we have done is we have created training activities associated to sustainability within the company. And, we also look at the gender pay and ethnicity aspect within the company. When I started off in my organization 12 years back, we had limited number of nationalities working for us. Today, there are over 20 nationalities working in our organization, right? So we have been benchmarking the ethnicity gaps within the company to try and understand where we can hire from. And when I talk about gender and ethnicity, it is not just about a male-female ratio or nationality ratio. In the larger view, it covers the skills gaps that you have within the companies, right? And you do exercises like competency mapping within your organization to try and determine what kind of talent do you really require. So you go beyond the nationality, you go beyond the gender biases that you have, and you focus purely on skills at that particular point in time. It is so important that organizations collect the diversity data and start evaluating it. We did an exercise in 2017 pre-COVID situation, and we found out that our organization never hired people of determination. And we actually went ahead not only hiring them, but we have done a live project with one of the schools in Dubai, UAE, and it's called Integrate. We did an internship program for people of determination, and we were so bold enough that we actually took 8 students from one school, Integrate School, and we put them on the shop floor, live shop floor, where they were interacting with customers. They were, stocking up our products in our supermarket for customers, and the customers are coming in and interacting with them. It was an uphill challenge because it took 3 months of preparation to work with their teachers to understand how their behavior was. And in return, the kind of dedication and discipline these students showed, in return, gave us a lot of knowledge in terms of what we should implement and what we should expect from our own employees, Finally, we involve a lot of our employees in CSR initiatives. It's not about, signing a check and issuing a check to a World Food Program or for a Zero Hunger campaign. What we do is we involve our employees in competitions associated to upselling certain products. And we involve customers by, telling them that if you buy a particular range of product, right, from our supermarket, then a particular amount of that will go into charity. So customer is not paying anything extra. The customer is just being, our employees are being persuasive to tell the customers buy these kind of products because they are organic, they are healthy, and then there is a charity associated to it. So we bring in the community together through our CSR initiatives. And I think that, creates a brand proposition for us as an organization where people see us as an organization which believes in ESG as well. The employee brand value proposition goes high, and we are seen as an employer of choice in the bargain. That's how it is.
Thanks for that. Every little action helps aggregate up and big impact. I have a lot more questions for the panelists, but I'll open up to the floor. Anybody has any questions? You can raise your hand. We'll get you a mic. If not, then I'll continue to ask the panelists and monopolize them. Hey, maybe I'll follow with a question. The D&I is a big thing in the West. All of you talk about D&I to some extent. In some jurisdiction, it is highly regulated in terms of disclosure of pay equity, the diversity ratio, gender, and in some countries, the race, ethnic background, etc. Do you think that the Asian countries will go that way in terms of heavily regulated on D&I? I'll just open to anyone who has any views.
Well, to answer your question, I don't think that path to heavy regulation is on the roadmap for Asian countries. Just based on experience of what other initiatives have come out from the West that are not as deeply embedded here in the region. Yeah. But just maybe a little point on D&I. I grew up in Malaysia, which was a multiracial country. And so for the longest time, I didn't really understand why we needed D&I. It was such a natural part of my upbringing. I didn't have to think about, we have to be diverse and inclusive, yeah? Until I saw this quote, which says, diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being invited to dance, okay? So diversity does not equate inclusion. Inclusion does not equate diversity. Ultimately, diversity is it's a diversity of thought. Yeah? And it so happens that the color of your skin is one of those proxies for diversity, right? So D&I needs to go together. And I think what we all need to also understand as HR practitioners is D&I contributes to a profitable business, right? Because our customers are diverse and we need multiple different perspectives in order to serve all our customers around the world well.
I think all of us being HR practitioners here, we don't need to really talk about how important D&I is, because I think half of our lives have gone into really putting in an effort on bringing in more diversity and inclusion within our organizations. I think what's also important is to understand that, of course, there can be different focuses at different times. So in some certain markets, we're working more on gender diversity, having more females in the leadership roles, more impactful decision-making roles, that's one. In some of our other markets, we're kind of acing it. So it depends on the kind of cultural mix that you have in different markets. But I think what's important is, and I agree with what Vicky was saying, is the inclusion part of it. So of course, you can bring in policies and certain programs that would ensure different mix of people coming together. But what's important is, as an organization, as HR, how do you support inclusion of all of these ideas into organization that reap some kind of value? Because that's what's important. The end game is to create value for the organization through diversity. So I think what we are, of course, working towards more is how do we be more inclusive in our different markets within the organization? What are different things, different barriers, so to say, that needs to be toned down in order for us to be more inclusive? How do you get a seat on the table? How do you become the voice of a certain group or not? I think that's our kind of things that needs to be worked upon, particularly on inclusion, in order to really get to the end game around diversity and inclusion. And of course, in terms of the programs, I think multiple programs, and it's not just gender, it's people with special needs. And there can be other things as well, where employers are providing opportunities to bring them to employment, giving them employment opportunities for them to be a full-time employee and giving them job opportunities. So these are kind of things that helps with the overall notion of D&I. But as I said again, inclusion, I think, is the key right now for us to really harness the potential of the whole thing. Yeah.
If you are a HR practitioner, we are actually preaching to the converted here. I think you all know, right? D&I, we have to foster it. There are some very specific, easy interventions that you can initiate in your own teams, in your own departments, in departments and all that. Very specific conversational interventions, right? that can encourage and build safe spaces for more diversity of thought. So, counting on you.
Well, I think just taking it ahead and adding, speaking about maybe few benefits that come out of D&I as such within the organization, I think it creates a good exposure for, mental health and well-being within the organization. And as we know, if somebody calls in sick, it is important to understand why they have called in sick. Okay, most of the absence ratio that comes in today's time comes in from mental illness, not necessarily because you had fever or cough, right? And another perspective is it will structure your pay management abilities within your, so a pay structure review happens within the organization when you look at diversity and inclusion. You are also looking at executive remuneration channels within the company. So many people, have not even, indulged themselves into understanding what is CEO's pay ratio in the organization. And when they will come to know, they'll be shocked to know, what is the CEO getting compared to an average person within the organization. So these are very important elements which get sorted when you think about diversity and inclusion within the company. And I think the last factor that very strongly I feel with my heart is modern slavery. Now, modern slavery has got many aspects to it, but one important aspect which is sometimes relevant to an organization which has got sizable amount of blue-collar workforce is forced labor. It is not necessary that an organization is forcing somebody to work extra hours, but it is important to determine what is the perception of that labor class employee and what does he feel in the organization. So even if the organization is good, but employees feel differently about it, diversity and inclusion channels, when you look at it from that lens, you try and take care of these aspects as well, where employees feel happy to come to work irrespective of what profiles they are working on.
Well, thanks to all of you for that. I think one thing I picked up from what you're saying is while we can have a diversity target, that is just a representation. How many percent of the workforce is this, is that, etc. The real impact part is inclusiveness. And that is HR's job, isn't it? Building an inclusive culture, whether it is gender diversity, multi-generation, disability workforce, etc. How do you build that inclusivity in order to get the outcome? Greater innovativeness, creativity, etc. That's exactly HR's job, very much.
But not just HR's job.
Sorry?
But not just HR's job.
For HR to pull the whole organization together. Great. Anybody? Any questions? If not, then I would request the panelists, each one, to give HR practitioners out there. Okay, I'll hold this question. Yes, please.
Hi. What would be your advice for a newly hired HR leader on how he or she can prove to his or her C-levels that having diversity and inclusion programs would have an ROI whenever they're investing on programs and initiatives related to this?
So if I get the question correctly, advice on D&I program over ROI concern. Did I get the question right? Oh, getting ROI out of D&I. How do we prove that? Okay.
I think it's a very difficult question, to be honest. And when I said that we've been spending quite a lot of time in the D&I effort, that's what I meant. Creating that kind of business case within the organization, saying that this is important, is because, of course, a lot of things that we do under D&I, you would see is more of a indirect linkage towards productivity, having a better conducive culture, which eventually sort of results into something around bottom line. It's not a direct connection where you can just show some of the numbers saying that, this is how many people we have from diverse background that directly contribute towards the business performance. Sometimes it does, sometimes it does not. But the overall question is, the reason that the D&I efforts across the organization, not just multinational who are leading in these trends, but all other smaller firms as well, why do you think that this topic particularly became from a good have to now a must have? There has to be some reasons around it. So clearly there are use cases where people with more diverse workforces, and we've all seen those use cases, we've all read those use cases, where having more diverse workforce has proven to have more positive impacts on the overall bottom line of the business. It's more about creating those use cases within the organization that can prove it. So of course, maybe you're not in a position to show an exact number to your executives right away, but the point is you can still, as HR, through the policies and through the programs that you're trying to bring in, through the talents that we're bringing in, it's important to have those use cases show that having more diverse teams does create a more productive environment within the organization, within the teams. And I think those use cases speaks for themselves and become more of adjacent to an ROI that way, the way I see it.
So to answer your question, you have seen a coin, and a coin has got two sides, right? It is important that you take that coin to the stakeholders and show them both the sides. So I'll give you one side, which is the social side of it, okay, which covers the employees. The second side covers the customers. From the social side, which is the employees, I think you need to first look at what is your employee data, okay? And let's say what is the attrition in your organization. If you have attrition which is mounting to 30%, 35%, 40%, you need to assess what are the reasons. And when you start, including the D&I practices that all of us have spoken about in the last half an hour or so, try and map, has your attrition reduced? Because if the attrition is same, maybe people are not even connecting with what you're trying to do in the organization. So attrition becomes an important data. Conduct skip meetings, okay, and make notes from those skip meetings, do assessments, and create those assessments, create those charts that you take to the stakeholder, and then you project those and tell the stakeholders that, look, we were sitting at particular attrition where employees were leaving left, right, and center. And now that we have started off, people have a broader sense of connect with the organization, and they have decided to stay back in the organization. Because you're not just talking about doing certain activities or doing certain skip sessions. You're talking about, with the assessments or the analysis that you do, you're going to hire the right skills and right talent into the organization. You're going to create, sustainable reward programs in the organization. Your variable benefits are associated to those kind of objectives. And if I may just give you an idea, in 2021, there's a project which was called Chancery Line Project. You should read about it. There were 21 clauses in Chancery Line Project, right? Out of which 2 clauses are very specific to HR. Number 1, it's called Scarlett's Condition, which talks about executive bonuses and variable pays, how it should be associated to sustainability, D&I projects, how it should be associated to ESG products. So if you are aligning your variable payouts and putting KPIs on this particular front, okay, your stakeholders are in for it rather than giving out that money just like that. The second aspect out of those 21 clauses, which is relevant to HR, is called Athena's Clause, which talks about training your employees on sustainability, involving them into sustainability and community-related projects. So please read about it. It is going to give you a lot of insight. The second side, which is the customer side of it, I think you should talk to your business heads, okay? Because business heads sometimes very strongly believe, and as quoted by Vicky sometime back, they believe that talent management is HR's job. And talent management is everybody's job in the organization. It is not just HR's job. So when you start managing talent from that perspective, you have a broader connect with people. It leads to what you do on the shop floor, leads to customers knowing, what you want to do. And if you have employees who connect with the organization, your employees are going to sell the product to customers and build that much more stronger connect from that perspective. And it is going to show in sales, by the way. So ESG is not just, a label in the organization. You have to evaluate what is happening after you make necessary investments, because stakeholders, when they put money in, they want something out of it. And that out is associated to sales or revenue that the organization, gets. And the second part is the branding proposition for the organization.
Anything to add? Okay. That is a very good question. That would apply to the entire ESG type of issues as well. But I think as we move into stakeholder capitalism, away from shareholder capitalism, our construct needs to change. The pure ROI or a concept of return on value. What is the downside risk if you don't address certain issues? Social costs, it may come back and hurt the business. I think that's the kind of a construct we need to be starting to think about. Maybe very quickly, if I could request each of the panelists to give an advice to the HR practitioners out there. If your CEO, your board, come back and say, we're going to drive ESG imperative from today onwards, if they are not already doing that, if they're going to do that, what would be your advice to the HR practitioner?
I think it's very important as HR practitioners to be able to link whatever we're doing toward the business strategy. And how do we drive the maximum value out of our business, core business, through these initiatives? Because as I said earlier, the business is all about returns, and the gentleman is asking the same question: how do we have returns on the kind of investments that we're doing? So if, as an organization, we're planning to invest more and more on ESG, of course, we also need to make that connect, that how does it impact the overall business and what kind of value it drives for the business particularly. And I think at the start of the conversation, I did say that it is, and right now Kunal was also mentioning the same thing, it is a kind of a journey where you do get to see the impacts, positive impacts on the overall productivity and financials, but it takes time, it takes assessments, it does take a bit of planning and structured interventions. What's important is to know what to solve as a business. So for me, maybe the proposition would be different. It would be different for Vicky, it would be different for Kunal. But what's important as a business is to understand, when you're talking about ESG, what is exactly are you trying to solve? And once you know that, you connect it with the kind of core business that you have, and then you drive it accordingly. That's all.
Vicky?
As a HR practitioner, you are the heart of your company. You are the heart and soul of the company. So to move ahead with ESG, I would say, keep it real. It's not a fad. It has to be done, and it has to be done with authenticity and honesty and passion.
Quickly to wrap it up, I would suggest to start off with a skills assessment within the organization. A bit off, but do a values survey. If I go around and ask everybody what are the values of your organization, I'm sure there are a limited number of people who can actually answer that question, right? HR should be the owner of values within the company. So my recommendation is do a values survey. Do one survey for junior level guys, do one survey for senior level guys, and it's an eye-opener. You'll realize how people see values in the organization. Try and associate ESG objectives to your values. And going back to the stakeholder concept, my friend who's sitting in the first row over here who asked this question, don't start a project and wait for the project to end. As the project progresses within the organization, keep your stakeholders updated on the progress, and they will be in for it.
Thank you very much. We use up all the airtime you afforded us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.